I have in any way, shape or form slandered you, I apologize in public.
If you don't admit you have.
Listen, be a man of integrity and listen.
Do you admit
listen,
or do you not admit?
listen. If I have slandered you in any way, shape or form, I am simply saying I apologize.
Fair enough.
Is that fair enough? Good.
Accepted.
Thank you. Now, it was never an intention to slander anyone, because if I slander anyone, how can I bring closer to think about Islam at all? I will drive you away from Islam instead. So my point today now is, in the next 10 minutes or so in the discussion that we're going to have, is if you really have some intellectual barriers or objections, obstacles, bring out your worst, troubling ones, 3 perhaps, then we can discuss. What are the most troubling objections that do you have for the ideology of Islam? As you said, ideology. And then we can discuss. Go ahead. Start with your most troubling one.
I will bring you one.
Go
It's
ahead.
that Islam is not certain. And let me prove it. Because last time I didn't come with the knowledge necessary for this. Has anybody here heard about the Scottish philosopher called David Hume? He's a Scottish Catholic that lived in the 18th century in Scotland. Now, Hume was a very intelligent man. He divided all knowledge that we have in 3 different categories. The first category is relations of ideas. A triangle in geometry, a triangle can only have 3 sides. If you have 2 apples and 2 oranges, you have 4 pieces of fruit. Those truths are undoubtful. Completely, they can't be denied. Because if you deny them, you enter self-contradiction. It's illogical to deny those truths. Now, this is, because I couldn't explain this one properly, examples were given to me because I was saying that nothing is certain. And people would ask me, is 1 plus 1 equal 2? Is the sky blue? Is the grass green? They ask me those kinds of questions. And we'll come to this one a little bit later. But first I need to speak about the other 2 examples that he gave. The examples of knowledge. As I said, there are 3. The two others are matters of fact, which is something that requires observation and not operation of thought. What does this mean? I see that the grass is, it's not very bright right now, but if it were the day, I would see that the grass right now here is green. It's still green. It's an observation. It's still green, but now it doesn't look that green because there's less light. And we'll come to light later. That's a very good thing for you to say, because I'll come to that later. Now, the grass is green, right? Everybody here can agree to that. Because we see this grass right now here that is green. We need to see it. We need to make certain of it by our eyes. Yes, because grass, when
you tell me it is over, let me know so we finish the discussion.
Nothing is certain.
I'll come to that later. Let me first, I'll explain to you Hume's perspective, and I'll explain to you why I agree with him. And then I'll tell you why this perspective makes what I said more believable than you think. Now, the third kind of knowledge is observe the regularities. I apologize. Observe the regularities. Now, what is an observed regularity? It's a matter of fact. It's composed by many matters of fact, but except it's a supposition for the future. It's a prediction. Every time I saw a crow, I saw black crows. That means that it's reasonable to say that all crows are black, even though I never saw all the crows in existence. This is the observed regularity. This means that the observed regularities are the most uncertain of truths. But still, we do believe them, because we need to believe them to survive. If I take a step forward, I believe that I will meet the ground with my foot and I will feel it. Because I took many steps, many steps behind, and I know it. I know it because it's, again, it's what it is. Now, these 3 truths might seem completely immutable to you guys. The second 2 ones, we can already see some flaws in them because they might not be completely truthful. The matters of fact depend on our senses, and because our senses are flawed, we might not see things exactly as they are. And that is exactly why I'd like to mention the grass is green argument. Let me just have a little choice here with my... here we go. And I would like to have a little bit of a speech about color. Now, color... What is color?
Bro, he's giving you 10 minutes.
What is color?
Yeah, when the 10 minutes is over, the discussion ends. You know that.
Fair
Carry
enough,
on.
you can end the
Carry on.
discussion, it's your choice. What is color? Color is light, and we see different colors because light has different fluctuations. It has different frequencies of the waves that fall upon objects. The light, it's reflected on objects, and the frequency of the fluctuation shows that is most reflected is absorbed by our retina. Our retina is a small organ inside our eye, and it's composed by two small particles, two smaller organs. One of them are rods. Rods perceive the world when there's very little light. That is why when we look at that grass over there, we 5 minutes. Cool, I have enough time. 5 minutes. That grass over there, if you look at it, it doesn't look as green as it would when there's light. And if there's almost no light, you will see it as gray or as black or as something like that, or as white if you are very intense light. Is that true? Do you agree on that? Yeah. Fair enough. Thank you. You might not agree for it, but you need to give a reason. So why does that happen? Because when there's very little light, the colors we see are not perceived. Because when there's very little light, we only perceive that with the calm down, bro. Calm down. Wait for your turn. Calm down, bro. I'm not an atheist, by the way. I'm not an atheist. Calm down, calm down. Don't take my time. Don't take my time.
You get extra minute, don't you?
Thank you very much. That's just. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Now, those small organs that absorb not the colors, but that see the world when there's very little light are the photoreceptors, but they are the rods, because they are the rods and the cones. Now, the rods and the cones, they're called the rods too because they kind of look like a rod. They're very, very, very small particles. The rods, they absorb, they see the world when there's very little light. Now, the cones, they are different because there's three kinds of cones. One of them sees red color, one of them sees blue color, and one of them sees green color. What does this mean? All the colors that we see, the only colors that we see, in fact, are only red, green, and blue. So now you ask me, how can we see the other colors that we see? For example, the light blue, black, like different colors. Now, this is because our eyes can't distinguish between very, very different colors, and thus, when we see kind of mixed together the rays of red and the rays of green and the rays of blue, I'm gonna call them by that name. But there's a reason for it. I'll explain it later. Our eyes can't see the difference because our eye kind of mixes them together. That is when we mix, when the rays of red and blue, for example, are mixed, we see purple. It's not actually purple, but it's how we perceive the world because our eyes see it that way. Because our eyes don't see it exactly the same way that it is if we saw all the colors. The butterflies are the perfect example for this, because instead of 3, they have 6 kinds of cones inside their retinas. 6 kinds. That means they see 6 different colors. They see twice the amount of colors that we see, by which we perceive the world. Let me go into a little bit of more detail into this. What's the difference between the perception of red, green, and blue? The red, we see the red color because the trillion oscillations per second of the small waves is 500. 500 trillion oscillations per second, we see red. 550, we see green. 650, we see blue. Those are the only colors that we see in the end. So a person saying that this grass is green and this grass will always be green and this grass, that's the absolute truth, that the grass is green, is simply not correct. Because it is our perception. It is the perception by our eyes. How can you possibly explain to a blind man what a color looks like? That's the same thing. If a butterfly could reason and could speak and could communicate with humans, it would never be able to explain the color that it sees, because it's simply unexplainable. It's something that they call the qualia, which are in fact ineffable, raw, unexplainable feelings. They are limited by our language, and some scientists think...
So okay, I've got 1 minute to respond.
The brother's got, let him go to 11 minutes.
No. So I've got 1 minute to respond to a question that is not even asked.
No problem, up to you, brother.
No. 10 minutes was a total. So now, no. Okay, 10 minutes was a total. No, let him finish. Because if he finishes in 10 minutes, then I have no to say, then I have to say, pack up my bags and go home. Simple.
We've got 11 minutes, so he's got...
Yeah.
Is it okay if he responds to
No, there won't be no response because he hasn't given me a chance to respond. Remember, the whole discussion was meant to be 10 minutes.
The point is, I was told by Jugnu here, and it wasn't an unbased assumption that the grass is green and it would keep being green. That's because this gentleman over here, but you know.
I said it looks green.
Yeah.
From what I see, it looks green. That's all I said.
No, but that proves that you can't be certain of your senses. This example is to disprove the second truth made by David Hume, and you know he already knew that the second and the third truths are very uncertain. The second one because our senses are flawed, because we don't perceive the world exactly as it is. Now the third one, they're flawed exactly. No, but that's just me walking to the whole point.
Ask him quickly what you want.
Now the third one is observed regularities. If you observe the regularities.
What is the point you're trying to get at, man?
Sorry?
What is the? I'm not trying to rush you, but your 10 minutes is done. But you've got 1 more minute.
Fair enough.
Extra. But what's your point?
What's the point? What's my point to the whole? My point is to show people that they can't be certain 100% of anything.
Whoa.
That is my point.
Now, okay.
And to show that,
you know what?
I am giving you these
examples. Even though I said 10 minutes, I think this requires a little bit of response, right? Rather than
The very thing that you say is a sense.
okay.
The very thing that you just said is a sense.
That's a very interesting question.
Brother.
Is uncertainty certain? There might be something certain.
I thought you finished.
Because our senses are flawed. That means uncertainty is not that certain. Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, remember what I asked you. Because things are troubling you about Islam in terms of its correctness, in terms of its authenticity, in terms of its divine origin, I asked you, give me the worst troubling from Islam in its ideology, that intellectually is an obstacle. You said Islam and its certainty. Islam is not certain. Yes. So you think Islam is not certain because of the reasons you've given from David Hume. So you gave us a nice lecture that you read from the notes that you've made from David Hume and also from science about rods and cones and photoreceptors. Thank you very much. Now, thank you. Well done to you. Are you certain about any of the things that you said?
Of course not.
Of course not. Right. So basically, since you're not certain about anything that you said, I can simply leave this to one side and say, I'm not interested in your uncertainties, okay? If you had anything certain to discuss with me to prove that Islam is wrong, then we can talk, because what you're bringing is, I don't know whether it's certain or not. Because that's what you're telling me. You're not certain what you've brought, whether this is in fact an argument, because I don't know, I'm not certain. So next time, if you really want to refute Islam, bring something that you're certain of. So I think we leave it there. I think everyone understands that. You brought something which is uncertain. You cannot disprove. You cannot disprove.
I just said I'm not.
He's not. So he's not certain.
No, but wait.
And what he brings is not certain. You cannot disprove something which you're not even certain of what you think. You cannot disprove something. I mean, you're a person who's intelligent. You should know very well how can you go about disproving something when what you're disproving with is, I haven't got a clue whether it's certain or not. Okay, nice try. Thank you.
Thanks.